Data protection and privacy teams are under more pressure than ever with new laws, AI oversight, data breaches, and the constant expectation to do more with fewer resources.
That's why TrustArc built a modern privacy and data protection management platform powered by Arc Intelligence. It unifies your tools, automates the work that slows you down, and surfaces what matters most right when you need it.
From guided quick actions to our intelligent assistant, Ask Arc, you get credible, contextual answers backed by expert research, not generic AI guesses.
Finally, privacy that works the way privacy pros work.
Learn how TrustArc helps teams move faster with confidence at trustarc.com/serious-privacy. That's trustarc.com/serious-privacy.
You're listening to Serious Privacy, powered by TrustArc. Here are your hosts, Paul Breitbart, Ralph O'Brien, and Dr. Kay Royal.
It's been a busy couple of weeks in data protection and privacy world. From state laws in the US entering into effect to a TikTok ban was there and then it wasn't. New European Data Protection Board opinions, the Court of Justice of the EU, regulatory issues in Kenya, and so much more. Oh, and did we even talk about DeepSeek? So welcome to a very extended week in privacy. My name is Ralph O'Brien.
I'm Paul Breitbart.
And I'm Kay Royal, and welcome to Serious Privacy.
Yes.
So, a lot packed in for this week. This is going to be good, right? We're starting off 2025 with the bang. I love it. Tell us more. Who's got the first story up?
No.
Expected question. Unexpectedly, I forgot. I like to do these random where I don't even know what the question is coming. So let's see. What's your favorite thing about your hometown?
Wow. Okay. What's my favorite thing about my hometown? Well, is it my hometown or?
And you're no longer there?
I mean, my hometown is a very small town beside the sea, a fishing village. So yes, that I'm no longer there is possibly one thing. Equally, I could add that where I am now used to be a brickwork. So it's one of the new planned towns in the UK with everything very much sort of planned. It's actually very sort of picket fencing compared to quite a lot of places that just sort of sprung up medievally. So there we go. There you go. Where I am now is a planned town.
Yeah, I would say my hometown is where I live now. That at least feels like my hometown, although it's not where I was born. But for me, it would be the beach and the sea. It's great living near the waterfront to just watch over the waves and sit down, see the sunset if the weather is nice. Best place.
And for me, it was exactly as I joked about with Ralph, that I'm no longer there. I'm from a small town in Mississippi called Meridian, Mississippi. Had a population of about 30 to 50,000, which isn't tiny. I mean, it's not a little village. And I guess my favorite thing is that Jimmie Rodgers, who is considered the father of country music, is from Meridian, Mississippi. And the father of rock is from Mississippi, and the father of jazz is from Mississippi, and the father of we'll just stop there. Mississippi has a lot of arts, but that's my favorite thing about my hometown.
Isn't Dolly Parton from Mississippi too?
Oh, no, she's from Tennessee.
Ah, okay. It's all in the South.
But
right?
from the South. Yeah.
So indeed, a lot has happened. So let's start just by looking at what happened this week and then go backwards a bit towards Christmas. I would say what happened today, Ralph, you looked into that.
Yes.
Is the Court of Justice of the European Union.
Yeah, well, we can start back up to date today. And by the way, today is the 29th of January, 2025.
Happy second Data Protection Day.
Happy second Data Protection Day, and in fact, happy birthday to one of our children. So there we go. And we've also been blessed with a judgment from the Court of Justice of the EU. Now, this one's an interesting one because this isn't against a controller or a processor. This is actually against the supervisory authority. People might remember that the Data Protection Commission of Ireland challenged the European Data Protection Board's competency over interfering or the dispute resolution process with Facebook and Meta last year. And well, surprise, surprise, the DPC's objections to the way the European Data Protection Board has handled that had been found that the European Data Protection Board was competent to make those decisions. So it's really interesting because this, of course, all started with the Nui against Facebook Ireland and then went through with Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and really finished with, the DPC, being quite unhappy with some of the decisions that the European Data Protection Board asked it to do, including carrying on new investigations on new aspects not yet examined, to issue a new draft decision on the basis of that new investigation. The DPC thought that they shouldn't be able to do that. The court says they can. How's that?
Well, not surprising indeed, but it's good that they do. And while we are on the topic of the court, just 2 weeks ago, at the start of the year, the court also ruled against a data protection authority, and that was the Austrian Data Protection Authority in a case on damages. The Austrian Data Protection Authority at some point had said, well, the number of complaints that a data subject can file can be no more than 2 per month, because otherwise we have too much work. We are not able to deal with so many complaints. So if you file more than 2 complaints a month, we consider that to be excessive. Obviously, this also caught the attention of NOIB, who are filing a lot of similar complaints to data protection authorities, and the Austrian Data Protection Authority is their home authority. This case also went up to the Court of Justice, and the Court of Justice has said, indeed, a data protection authority cannot just limit the number of complaints that an individual can file. So excessiveness is not just based on volume or vexatiousness as a reason to deny the procedure. So you really need to go above and beyond to demonstrate as a data protection authority that a complainant is really just doing this for fun or is trying to annoy you, but doesn't have a case to answer. So in this case, also the court awarded damages. It was a couple of €100, so that was not very impressive. And also, I don't believe that there was a lot of serious harm done in this particular case. But still, it goes to show that the threshold for vexatiousness and for limiting individual rights under data protection law is fairly high. I'm not completely sure how that will affect the similar provision that the GDPR also has for limiting data subject access requests or other individual rights requests against a data controller, where you can also say, hey, if there is an excessive amount of requests from one individual, you could deny them or charge a reasonable fee. But it can be expected that the court will have a similar high bar there, much higher than at least I so far expected it would be.
And this is actually interesting to me because it shows some divergence between the EU and the UK. There's a case that went through the UK in 8th of March 24 that we called Dello versus the Information Commissioner, and that was about the Court of Appeal ruling that the Information Commissioner's Office here in the UK didn't have to investigate every single complaint that it received. And, it really gave the ICO some very broad leeway on whether it, had to investigate complaints from data subjects at all. So to me, that's actually means that there's actually a real divergence of what the UK courts and what the European courts are putting on the record.
Yeah, I think in part that is also due to the GDPR, because I recall that when I was still working for the Dutch Data Protection Authority, we had a similar policy, selective to be effective, that Richard Thomas, the predecessor of John Edwards as Information Commissioner in the UK, helped to develop, where indeed some focus would actually help to increase the levels of compliance across the board. Under GDPR, that policy has already shifted also here in the Netherlands, just because the GDPR is very prescriptive, thou shall investigate, although it doesn't specify how deep the investigation should go, of course. Okay, any views from the US? Any experience with data protection investigations or damages or?
No, not from any enforcement, especially not any state enforcements like Texas or Colorado, and certainly not any movement in the state laws for AI, which is all around the world now, and not from any type of settlement agreements, especially on class actions. I mean, why would you think the U.S. is doing anything in privacy? I'm sorry. Did that come out? Did I use my inside voice on that one?
No, just your royal
well,
voice.
talking about the US and the Privacy and Civil Liberties Board will, I believe, we're going to do in the next episode.
Yes. If anyone's waiting on me to speak up about a lot of developments we've seen in the U.S., we're going to have a U.S. episode next. However, it won't address everything in the U.S. Let's be clear.
It will address the constitutional issues.
Yep. We're going to meet with a constitutional professor and speak about constitutional issues. But I mean, what I see going on in Europe with your decisions doesn't seem to at all reflect what we see in the U.S., even though things are different. I mean, you don't have here where boards can file a complaint or enforcement agents can file a complaint against another enforcement agent or any type of way to hold them accountable or anything like that. Now, doesn't mean to say that we have anything done wrong here. I mean, we do have countries with privacy laws that don't have any enforcement mechanism. But what it does mean is that for those of you new to privacy, the way that you see it, data protection enforced in Europe, whether it's the UK or the European Union or the EEA or anything over there, is not going to necessarily and most often diverges from how you're going to see any type of enforcement action here in the US.
Yeah, I think that's definitely agreed. And again, I have to point out, in my UK capacity, that here we're a different jurisdiction again, right? So, you're going to see different sets.
We don't have a noise.
No, yeah, there is. But what you do have is a TikTok back again, briefly, sort of. So that is something in the US we can talk about, isn't it? The ban that was
Right.
Yeah, that we'll address in the next episode.
We're going to talk about that on the constitutional pieces of it because y'all know we were watching that really quickly. When we started watching it at first, I don't even think there was really a thought that who is currently president would have even been allowed to be in the running. And so it wasn't even an initial part of most of the evaluation. So I'm expecting the next episode to be a lot of fun on that side. But on the other hand, I mean, this brings up the topic. I mean, one, we're seeing a lot of movement in AI around the world, different countries bringing up. I mean, Australia has a call out for voluntary.
Are you going to China?
No, I'm not going to China. No.
Not DeepSeek?
No. I might. I'm thinking about it. I was thinking about AI, and so I was working my way around there. But what I was going to say is that users of social media that are especially at risk of these types of applications that might be used for espionage really are unaware of the risks of it. And further, they don't care. They hear privacy people saying, don't do it. And they're like, yeah, right. Like China's going to spy on me. There you go. I went to China.
Yeah, we were having a conversation today on AI, and I'm actually quite a fan of using the term absent intellect rather than artificial intelligence because actually, human beings always choose simple and wrong over complex and right. You give them a choice of something that's going to make their lives easier or give them an instant magical data fairy answer. They will choose that rather than critically think. So what I think is really interesting with AI is, we'll accept simple and quick and fast and wrong over
and free
over our ability to sort of critically think and rationally go through. And actually, I think personally, AI needs more thought rather than less thought as we begin to increasingly automate over data sets. So when we're talking about DeepSeek, I think DeepSeek is fascinating because you've got this Chinese model that's now number one in all of the app stores. ChatGPT dropping down the app stores. ChatGPT throwing up their hands in horror and saying, oh, well, they probably used our model and they've nicked all of our data. And I have to then ask myself, is that the pot calling the kettle black? Where did ChatGPT get its data from? I find it all very amusing.
Well, it's mainly, I think it's also the competitive, the advantage, right, of something already being there instead of inventing it from scratch. Even if they didn't use all the data that OpenAI has in their files, just the idea of OpenAI and how it works. And we know that the Chinese are very good in reverse engineering, whether it's software or cars or anything, any appliance that you can buy, they're really good at that. So it is not unlikely to me that they reverse engineered some of the technology used in ChatGPT and used that to their advantage. Whether or not they use the training data from OpenAI or just scrape the internet themselves, I would argue that's the same difference.
It's what OpenAI did, right?
Yeah. And first to market is not always best to market.
This is true, yeah.
Also true.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, OpenAI was not the first to market, obviously, with an LLM.
Right.
And also, not to be forgotten, they probably lowballed the number that they have spent, and maybe that's the number, the 7 million that they used for development. Maybe that's the number of investment money, and they just simply forget all the money that they got from the Chinese government, which is very likely behind DeepSeek, at least with grants to help develop, to show that China can do something similar as the US. And the US are not the only ones working on LLM models and reasoning models. I think that's probably to be expected, that also the Chinese government has heavily invested, but that those numbers will not, cannot, shall not be disclosed.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm trying to use both models at the moment. It's unusual, and I don't download the app off the App Store or use their public-facing website. I've actually sort of hosted my own, and so I'm not using the public versions. I'm using my own, their algorithms locally hosted on training data that I've selected. I mean, it is interesting because we are starting to get, people saying, oh, look, the DeepSeek doesn't recognize the Tiananmen Square massacre, whereas ChatGPT does. So, so selective reasoning within the search results, based on where it's found. I mean, so there are some interesting stories about, censorship and what's in that programming. But equally, ChatGPT has got elements where it doesn't want to go. You ask it questions of a sexual nature or about certain individuals, and it will say, sorry, I don't want to comment. And so, there are some really interesting questions, I think, about the freedom we have to find information since the gateways we use to access it and who programs them with what slant or agenda, and as you say, most people will just pick it up and use it without giving it that critical thought and critical analysis.
Yeah, without thinking about any consequences. And if, like I said, if we tell them about them, then they think that the professionals that know these things are paranoid. Well, paranoid doesn't mean you're wrong.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so it is interesting. And then, Ralph, I know you're coming to speak to my law class tomorrow, and you'll find it interesting. I don't know if they'll speak up and ask questions. I hope they do. That on one hand, they say we don't want to take the time to read 5 pages of a privacy notice, even if a company puts the right stuff in the privacy notice and they're true and they're transparent. We don't want to read that on an app we're trying to download. But then in the same class, they will express their frustration with not knowing what a company is doing with their data. And they don't even realize that the circular argument that they're making there. So what else do we have going on in the world?
Yeah, we have a few things from the European Data Protection Board. They've had their first meeting and they have adopted long-expected guidelines on pseudonymization. And the guidelines are available for comment right now. So if this is a topic that you are interested in, you have until the end of February to provide your insights on how this should work. I should warn you, it is a fairly technical opinion, and I'm still making my way through it to really understand it.
I've got to say, actually, I was fairly disappointed because I didn't find it as it was almost like a discussion paper rather than an actual set of guidance for a regulator, right?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. As you say, it is up for comment, but I didn't. It wasn't the regulator saying this is what pseudonymization is and this is what our guidance is. It always just felt like someone doing their thesis on pseudonymization. It was a very sponsored, a very technical paper rather than an actual guidance.
Yeah, and what they have made clear in the press release are 2 things, which I think is also stating the obvious. One, pseudonymous data, which could be attributed to an individual by the use of additional information, remains information related to an identifiable natural person and is therefore still personal data. Indeed, if the data can be linked back to an individual by the data controller or somebody else, it remains personal data. And 2, pseudonymization can reduce risk and make it easier to use legitimate interest as a legal basis, as long as all other GDPR requirements are met. So the board says pseudonymization, yes, really good. Do it, use it, because it's better for security. It's better for your legal basis. But don't forget, pseudonymous data is still personal data. legally speaking.
Yes.
And that is the continuous debate we're having between the lawyers and the developers who consider anything that is
Right.
pseudonymized as anonymous data, which legally speaking is not the case. So that is really important. But
Right.
I will side with Ralph.
And not the identified.
And also not the identified, indeed. I do side with Ralph. I was also disappointed, not so much because of the content of the opinion, because as said, I'm still making my way through it, but this is in part an update of an opinion from 2014, 2015 on anonymization and pseudonymization techniques. And that update has been expected for 3 years. We do have the pseudonymization part now, but there is no word on whether there will be an anonymization part, and if so, when that will appear. Is this to say there is no anonymization possible? Is that still coming? I don't know, and that is what worries me. Maybe indeed the board comes to the conclusion right now anonymization is no longer legally possible.
That's what's always been a thing for me. You look at the legal definitions and they say anonymization cannot be reversed. Pseudonymization can be reversed. But actually, when you actually think of the real world, it's more like a percentage chance. It's like there is no absolucy. You can say, oh, do I reasonably think that no one could
Right.
reverse engineer it? You just don't know what someone else out there has, right? So, I always think even though the law says
Yeah.
can be reversed, cannot be reversed, it's kind of a, the world just doesn't work like that. Then it's more like a percentage probability based on what anyone else has that it can be reversed. And I want to double down on what the press release said as well, because being technically correct is always the best sort of correct. I used to say, there are 4 categories of data in the GDPR: anonymous, pseudonymous, personal data, and special category data. Technically wrong, because pseudonymous and special category data have to be personal data first, right?
Right.
So you could argue there's anonymous and personal data, and then pseudonymous and special category data are subcategories of personal data, right? And again, that's for the real geeks listening. So, perhaps this is where I have the conversation.
Well, and I do think that when we look at the ability to be reversed, which means to re-identify the data, the key part is data that you have or data that is available to you. And in this world of big data, as Paul says, is that the case? Can someone purchase data that would make it re-identifiable? However, I think there's also another perspective to look at this. Are you looking at classifying the database as a whole as pseudonymized, or are you going down to the individual entries and saying fact specific on that entry, is that specific entry re-identifiable? And that's where I think you can definitely get into trouble, because look at my world in claims management. There's probably only one NFL super. I don't know if this is an honest claim we have or not. I'm making it up off the top of my head. If an NFL superstar gets into a plane crash in a specific location, in a specific, let's just say, month, doing a specific activity, that's re-identifiable, even if you remove all of what the IT people would mostly consider personal data or personal identifiers. And just as a personal peeve of mine, I don't like the term personally identifiable information, PII. That just irritates the heck out of me. It's personal data or it's identified data.
Well, I'm glad you said that. It's a really point of view. It hurts like
Yes.
hell when you hit the people using it instead of personal data, because the two are legally very different scopes.
To trying to change people's ingrained mindset that PII is not a thing.
Yeah.
That it is an outdated American concept that even in the US has no validity anymore. That takes a long time.
I know we're coming up on time. I know we're coming up on time, but before we come up on time, one of the things that we talked about in the introduction, which I know we haven't touched on, is Kenya. So, Paul, over to you.
So, I was going to say, Ralph, over to you, because you are the one that spotted this in the news. What we would like to address is a complaint made actually in Kenya against the Data Protection Commission. There we go again.
Mm-hmm.
I feel a trend throughout this episode that the Data Protection Commissioner actually is being sued for handling violation cases. A Nairobi lawyer is challenging the powers of the Data Protection Commissioner to hear and determine cases touching on personal data and the violation of data protection, because he says this is unconstitutional.
Yeah.
I'm very, very surprised by this. So basically, the lawyer, Henry Arunda, says that the unconstitutional powers of the Office of the Data Protection Commission to investigate and find a determination on the right to privacy is akin to amending the Constitution in a way that the Constitution doesn't foresee. And this is quoted in Business Daily
I think
Africa.
what this comes down to is he's saying the Data Protection Commissioner is not a court, and therefore it should be in the court's powers to issue penalties rather than the commissioners. Now, we know in the EU, for example, the EU looks, especially when it comes down to looking for adequacy, that a country has both judicial redress and administrative redress. So redress for a court and redress for a regulator, right? So administrative and judicial redress. So this individual is challenging in Kenya and saying, by doing the administrative redress, they're effectively acting as a court, and that doesn't fit with the Kenyan constitution. So we'll see how that turns out. My own thoughts are, isn't it nice to have a regulator and a court? But, there we go.
Yeah, and I mean, it is an act of parliament, so I would be surprised if this really was an issue that it wouldn't have come up during the parliamentary debate, that an administrative authority would not be allowed to impose a sanction. I hardly believe that the Data Protection Commission is the first administrative authority in Kenya with sanctioning powers. But, I mean, we'll see. There are countries in the EU which have the same system, right, where the Data Protection Authority can only recommend a sanction that then needs to be imposed by the police or the judiciary, for example, in Denmark.
And it was the same before the GDPR in a lot of jurisdictions, like in Ireland, for example. You originally had to go to the court, and the Irish Commissioner didn't have powers, So, yeah, I mean, it's not alone. I've done some work in Ghana, and it's exactly the same in Ghana. The regulator has to, recommend to the courts, and the courts do the final issuing. I personally think it's great for the individual to have an administrative redress and judicial redress. But you could argue that's sort of a double bubble risk for the controller, right? That they could be hit from both sides. And a good example of that in the UK would be British Airlines, where the RCO issued a penalty, and then individuals went for damage or distress, settled out to court, but still, those both avenues are available.
That's how it works here in the US. You get hit by every avenue that's out there.
A private right of action and a regulator. Yeah, there you go.
Exactly. And criminal findings versus civil findings, too, for the exact same thing. So let's be, we all grew up on OJ, right? I'm probably dating myself on that one.
So before we wrap up, are you familiar with Casper?
Friendly ghost?
The friendly ghost. No, this is actually not a friendly ghost. I mean, I like the...
This is the KASPER?
This is KASPR, which is an extension for a Chrome browser that enables paying customer to scrape professional contact details off LinkedIn out of the database of Casper. And on the 5th of December, the French Data Protection Authority imposed a €240,000 fine on Casper for illegal scraping, for failure to comply with having illegal bases, no data retention periods, insufficient transparency, failure to respect the right of access. And this is not a massive fine, but what is much more important is that Casper is to cease collecting the data.
Yep.
So they received a processing ban, and they have also received an order to delete all the data collected in this way. And finally, we see that data protection authorities also start making use of those sanction possibilities. Stop doing that, don't do it again, and delete everything you have collected in the past.
Yeah, I actually prefer to see them use the full range of enforcement powers rather than just administrative penalties. I mean, to impose a ban on processing, that's powerful. Stop processing personal data.
Well, and that's what we've shared with people here in the U.S. when they're like, well, what is the actual risk of not complying with GDPR? We get fined. And if we refuse to show up in court like that one Canadian company did, are we actually going to be fined or not if we don't have a physical presence in Europe for them to enforce against? Well, they can stop you from doing business in Europe.
Yeah, and if need be, they can go to the internet service providers to just block your IP addresses and block your DNSs and block your access. If need be. I mean, that is very far-ranging, but if need be, they can do it.
They can do it.
On that happy note, let's wrap up.
Happy 2025! Addition to our normal recording. Literally, as we were recording, we had some breaking news coming out that we thought we'd include in the podcast just for a just to make sure that we were fully up to date as these things go out. And it's got to do with good AI friends DeepSeek and ChatGPT again. Turns out, just as we were going online, the Italian regulator, the Garante, one of my favorite actual regulatory names. I like the idea of the guarantee of data protection. Well, the Italians apparently reached out to DeepSeek to ask them, how it was working. And you'll remember the Italians before tried to put in a ban on processing for ChatGPT in Italy. Well, it turns out that DeepSeek got back to them, and DeepSeek basically said, well, we're not going to offer services in Italy, and the GDPR doesn't worry us anyway because we're Chinese. Now, the Italian Garante didn't take very well to that. And actually, when you think about it, it is available on the app stores. And we've seen a few different takes on it. Some interesting takes is that there is no Chapter 5 applicability, no international transfer applicability, because it's direct collection from the individuals. There's no controller or processor sending it to China. It would be directly collected via the individuals via the DeepSeek app and then stored on servers in China. So no Chapter 5 applicability, certainly, potentially. But actually, Article 3.2, can they say the GDPR doesn't apply? Well, to me, certainly, and to the Italian authority, it seems like they are certainly monitoring people or offering goods and services within Italy, by releasing it on the app stores and such like. So the Italians, the news here is the Italian Garante then took the decision to immediately block DeepSeek in Italy, which is an action, a hell of an action, really. And we've seen the press release from the Italians Garante about DeepSeek being blocked and that chatbot software not being able to be used in Italy anymore. Update over. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.
That was Serious Privacy.
This wraps up our podcast for this week. Please do share the episode with your friends and colleagues because we love to get more listeners. And join the conversation on LinkedIn or on Blue Sky. You'll find us under Serious Privacy on both platforms. You'll find Kay as Heart of Privacy, Ralph as IGR O'Brien, and myself as Europol B. Until next week, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye, y'all.
If you're a data protection or privacy professional, you already know the pressure. Non-stop regulatory change, AI oversight, internal demands, and the expectation to somehow stay ahead of it all. And the old patchwork of tools just isn't cutting it anymore.
No, that's why TrustArc created a modern privacy management platform powered by Arc Intelligence. The TrustArc platform brings your workflows, evidence, research, tasks, and applications all together in one unified and intelligent workspace so you don't waste time digging, clicking, or context switching.
With Ask Arc, your privacy assistant, you can ask plain language questions about laws, jurisdictions, or even your own program data and get credible, cited answers based on Nimity research and more than 1,000 global laws. It's explainable, transparent, and purpose-built for data protection and privacy.
So if you need to add a vendor, create a cookie banner, or start an assessment, quick actions take formally complex tasks, turn them into bite-sized guided workflows to save you time.
It's a platform that thinks like you, works like you, and helps you move faster with confidence, whether you're a seasoned DPO or you're just getting started.
See how modern privacy gets done. Explore Arc at trustarc.com/serious-privacy. That's trustarc.com/serious-privacy.